Victoria 3 is a game which many people suffer with. The bad tooltips, the worst tutorial, and the complete lack of feedback can make it very difficult to even understand what is going on, let alone to learn or really come to understand how to play. For that reason, when I heard good friend of the channel Jillian was making a video on Victoria 3 as a part of Paradox's free weekend for the game, I got pretty excited, I won't lie. The prospect of seeing someone actually just launch the game and try to learn it, someone smart, but someone who just doesn't really know what she's getting into, that is an interesting prospect. The free weekend, by the way, is ending pretty much right when this video is going live, so sorry about that. But Victoria 3 is still deeply discounted for a while, and if you're interested in buying it, consider using my link, which lets you buy a Steam key via Paradox's official store, and gives me a little cut of the proceeds. Back to Jillian's Victoria 3 experience. Now, I won't lie, the well was somewhat poisoned, as I did talk with her a bit and provide her a document with some tips about how to make her specific idea for her playthrough happen. But let's be clear here. 12 pages of information, a lot of which is just graphs and charts, is not enough to explain to someone how to really get this game. What this document was essentially a one-off strategy for making wine profitable. It explained that if you want wine to work, you'll need trade, and you'll need a navy, and you'll need to do some diplomacy, and that's it. The poor girl threw herself into the game, and my job now is to see how she did, and then try to explain to both her and you, the humble audience, where she went wrong and how to improve. This video is kind of, in a way, a mix of an essay and a tutorial on my part. It covers a lot of how Victoria 3 completely and utterly fails to really explain itself to its players, and I'm hoping that through the tutorial aspect of this video, I can help show that Victoria 3 can be understood and it can be fun. Let me be clear as well here, since all Victoria 3 mechanics more or less derive from its economic systems, this video focuses in close on the economics of the game, and the politics to a lesser extent, since those are intertwined, but we don't really look closely at things like the diplomacy of the game, or navies, or war, and all that. Those things are actually relatively intuitive for the most part, and if you're a new player trying the game out, I'll tell you that if you can figure out the economy, then the rest will follow quite easily. Without further ado, the Jillian United States Disaster Save. So we load in here, and we see that a couple of things are immediately apparent. And first is that the territorial integrity of the United States has in fact been successfully violated, might even say, as the Confederates are broken free. But before we even dive into any of this, there's an order of operations here. What I want to talk about is the kind of game Victoria 3 is, and as an extension of that, the most important mechanics, which are of course the economic parts of the game. So Jillian's premise for the video was like, we're gonna make wine and we're gonna be woke. That's like the idea, right? So with that in mind, those are the two things that we're gonna try to look at and to understand and explain. Now, before we do any of that, let's diagnose some of the problems with the United States. The most glaring of which, of course, is the loss of territory in the South. Now, what's interesting about Victoria 3 is that of all the Paradox suite of games, losing land in Victoria 3 isn't always the worst thing ever. You have to ask yourself, like, what are you losing here? We're losing access to some population. So if you look here, there's like 93,000 peasants here or whatever, right? People are important in Victoria 3. They're workers and they pay taxes, and that's really nice. But you also are losing out on things like, the local resources. So we can't get the cotton that's in Georgia. We can't get the South Carolina dyes or whatever, right? This kind of thing. The thing is, for the build that Jillian's doing, she just wants to make wine all day. And we don't need any of this stuff for wine. So who cares? We have plenty of our own wine up in the north. Speaking of which, the economy right now is basically just wine. And it is impressive. She managed to become the number 2 producer in the whole world, quickly, catching up to France to become number 1. The thing is that, of course, if you produce just one thing, the price goes super low. And I think most people understand how that works, right? They understand, like, when there's too much of something, the price gets really low, right? But let's talk a little bit about, like, why you even care about things like the profits on these buildings or whatever, because Victoria 3 can be difficult to understand at times. Why does this profit number matter? Because you might say, okay, it's making some money, and that's nice, I guess, but what's the point of this? In this case, the profits are mostly being paid out to the government because we own this wine, and that's fine, but I want to talk about capitalists, okay? The whole point of Victoria 3, if you just boil it down to basically the most simple thing, is that you want to make money and then extract that money from the capitalists or from the aristocrats or from the workers, whoever's making the money. You want to extract it, turn it into budget, like so we see here, through taxes, and then use that to create, an army or government buildings or a navy, whatever. You want to extract money from people and turn it into the stuff that you want to make, in a way that you don't cause a mass revolution and destroy your country. Because you might just say, just put the taxes up. And this is valid. Taxes means more money. But you also see here, it's going to make people really upset. So we don't like that, right? It's about the compromise between how much of the economy you can pull value out of without making everyone really hate you. And there are multiple ways to pull money out of a capitalist, let's say. The most obvious one you might be thinking about is like taxation. And taxes in Victoria 3 have different types. So if we look here, Gillian at some point in her run very effectively enacted proportional taxation, which means that she has an income tax rate, a consumption tax rate, and a dividend tax rate. Now the dividends are the ones we're interested in. If we look at any capitalist in New York here, which we can find them in this list, here's one, a capitalist, and we check out their economy, we can see part of their expenses is a 12% dividend tax. And this is great. This means that we can take money from the capitalists, but you'll notice that they're making like a lot of money, and we're only taxing a very small portion of it. So that's not very good. This money's kind of just being stuck in the hands of the capitalists, and they're going to use it to buy stuff. This is what they most spend their money on, is buying things. Now, when they buy things, they create demand for goods. So for example, if I wanted to make, let's say, a coffee-based economy, then these guys are buying a lot of coffee. So they're the ones who are creating the demand for the coffee. Now, the problem is that all we do is like, the coffee we do have is made in Liberia, which we'll talk about that in a little while. But point is, capitalists contribute to the economy by either getting taxed or they buy things, or, and this is the much more important thing, they will contribute to the reinvestment pool. And this is what we got to talk about here. This is the part that's most important, okay? The reinvestment pool is effectively, just again simplified, a measure of all the profits of all the stuff in your country. And this investment pool will accumulate money until it can be used to build things. And the people that build it are the private sector. Now what we'll notice here, that Gillian has zero private construction happening. And this is because, of course, her investment pool is very weak. She's only making £15,000 per week in the investment pool. And to make a building, it's usually about £150,000 to start a building. It depends on the building, but about £150,000. So she can get like one building made every 10 weeks. So that's about every 2 months. That's not very good. We got to fix that. The reason why she's having trouble with that, of course, is because her wine is not very profitable. It is still profitable, but it's not particularly profitable. One thing to note, by the way, is that even when something is government owned, you can see here that this is mostly government owned vineyards. These still pay into the reinvestment pool regardless. In Victoria 3, the only way to not actually have a private sector is if you go to command economy. But this is like, don't worry about this. This is like super late game. It's a very strange thing. It also is often very broken, if you ask me. But like, that's a different matter, is the command economy idea. We won't talk about that today. Instead, we're going to talk about the need for profit and what it actually does for us. Now listen, Gillian, if you're watching, I know you want to do the wine economy, but I'm going to say this. You've already done the wine economy at this point. This is a lot of wine, okay? And we'll make it profitable. We'll find ways to get this going. But for now, we have to move on to other things. So we're currently building even more vineyards in Pennsylvania. But instead of doing that, we're going to start making some like more industrial style goods. The thing you have to ask yourself whenever you think about what to build is the stuff I'm making going to be useful for what I'm doing? And also, will it be profitable? So you might think, for example, if you have a big military, you might want to make munitions. And whether these are profitable or not doesn't really matter. You're doing this because you need like ammo for your armies, right? That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But when it comes to these industrial goods, we have a kind of two-sided necessity here. We need industrial goods so that we can cheapen the cost of construction. So you see here, in the construction section of our budget, what we're spending money on is iron, wood, tools, and fabric. These are our construction goods. And it would be to our advantage if these were cheaper. So because of that, we'd like to make some tools. So we're going to start doing that. We notice here it tells us what the predicted earnings are. That's beautiful. We would love to, make that much money. This is the earnings for the building, by the way, not necessarily for your budget or anything. This is the earnings for the actual building itself. So these earnings will be distributed according to this distribution here. Some of it goes to the people in the financial districts, some of it goes to the local workforce, some of it goes to the reinvestment, some of it gets taxed, some of it goes directly to the nation. It just depends on who owns it. Regardless, let's queue up some stuff. So I'm going to queue up these things until it's no longer profitable. So again, it gives you a good prediction. This prediction is honestly pretty accurate. I find that it's pretty useful to rely on. So with a couple of those, and then we also want iron. So we'll build a couple of those. Just build a couple iron mines here until it's not profitable. You know, maybe 9 of them, sure. We'll also want some coal, because the coal is going to be used in the iron mines, but also it's going to be used in the steel mills. So we have several reasons to want to build the coal, and of course the steel mills pay into the tooling workshops. I think most people don't need a tutorial about how like inputs and outputs work. Like, I don't think you need to be big brain to know cheap input good, expensive output good. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what we're aiming for here. That's what generates the profits, the revenue, right? There's an important note to be said about the investment pool, and that's that in Victoria 3, the class that has obtained consciousness is actually the upper class. It's the capitalists and the aristocrats, because the investment pool is shared by all capitalists and all aristocrats. So that means that, let's say you want to get your vineyards to be purchased by the Sailor du Vin Quelque Part company in New York. Let's say you want that to happen, okay? They won't do it because they don't have any money. There's no money in the investment pool. But what's funny is that if I generate money from the investment pool by making iron and coal mines and by making tooling workshops and stuff, that counts for the purpose of making money that the wine company can then use to buy more vineyards. So for the purpose of the wine economy, Victoria 3 is weird. We need to make a balanced economy that can make a lot of money so that the wine can have enough money to purchase more vineyards and produce more vineyards. So I know it sounds counterintuitive, but essentially for the vineyards to prosper, we have to start industrializing more. So once we unpause the game, we'll start seeing kind of how the GDP is affected and how like our stats are affected by getting these new buildings. But I just want to also quickly say, in terms of how Jillian played, like, this is like suboptimal, but I mean, it's a tactic, like just spamming out wine. I'm gonna actually subsidize it because I want to make sure, like, in the interest of pursuing the theme of the game here, we're gonna always make sure there's plenty of wine in the market. But like, to be clear, making a ton of wine is not a horrible thing. It's not like it's a waste. It's just that it's not as good as making other things. In Victoria 3, no building is like truly a waste, except maybe if you were to spam like government bureaucracies. These don't generate any profit, they just cost money. Like, any building that is creating goods for the market is doing something, you know? And we'll talk about what's more effective and what's less effective later, but for now, we're going to be looking into just, you know, industrializing, essentially. The recent Great Wave patch really did shake up the meta with regards to builds that rely on just one good. In the past, via trade, you really could just make one good, like wine, and export it enough overseas to make enough profits that your capitalists could build the rest of the economy. This is the point about investment pool, is that all profits being shared between all ownership class pops means that one successful industry just carries the rest of the economy. Things are different now, and that's unfortunate because it means some of the stuff I taught Jillian will be a little bit invalid, but you know, new meta is always nice, I guess. One mistake I saw Jillian making as well was that she had infrastructure problems. Infrastructure comes from railways and also from ports technically, but mostly railways. And I'll tell you this, railways tend not to be very profitable. It's not like in real life where railways were like incredibly profitable. In this game, they're very not good at making money. So what you do is you just subsidize them. When you subsidize something, you pay for any like failure to make profit. So if they start not making money, you just cover it from your government budget in the subsidies section here. But like, we're not here for profits, we're here for infrastructure. So I don't care if this is profitable or not. Anyway, let's unpause at this point. And while we do that, we can talk about the budget. So the budget is looking pretty bad right now. And you might think, okay, we probably should raise taxes, or we should stop constructing or something. Like, you might have some ideas in your head of how to fix it. And something like stopping construction would be fine. You could do that. You could raise taxes, but just be careful because more taxes means even more radicals, and that'll be a problem for reasons we'll go over pretty soon. But like, taxes can be scary, right? You gotta be careful about that. What you actually want to do in order to fix this problem is that we need to get the private sector to take on the costs of the construction goods. So we see here that our investment pool is really bad, as talked about before, but they're trying. They're covering about a third of our costs right now. So you see here we're spending 61K on construction, and it actually breaks it down for you here quite nicely. 38K of that is being spent by my budget, like as in my balance here. 22K is being spent by the investment pool. We want to shift this balance to be more private rather than government, because that way we can save money, is the idea. Thus, we need to make profitable industries. And for that to happen, we have to keep building. So we're not going to pause construction, even though we're taking on debt, because we need to make a profitable, industry. And that's going to be our iron and our coal mines and our lumber mills and all that. So, obviously it wouldn't be very woke, but we could return to slavery right now, because we have John Calhoun and Atticus Pyrrhon as leaders here, and they're both slavers. I guess this is a good opportunity to talk about the politics a little bit. Essentially, the clout of an interest group is determined by the wealth of the people that sponsor them. So, if you look at any given group of people, let's look at, say, the population of New York. Let's look at some peasants, because they're probably... Actually, there aren't any peasants here, are there? Maybe in Ohio, there'll be peasants. There you go. So look at a peasant. We look at their overview. We can see what interest groups they support. So based on some math, don't worry about mousing over this stuff, looking at the math. Okay, don't worry about that. Just look at the numbers in general and see, okay, peasants tend to support farmers, and they also tend to support the church, right? That makes sense, I guess. They're kind of conservative and poor and backwards and whatever, right? The more voting laws that you have, so as in the more reverse suffrage that you have, the less that wealth matters. So you can see here that on census suffrage, which is one step away from the most liberal voting law you can have, political strength comes mostly from votes. You see, legitimacy based on votes is 85. Again, the numbers don't really... It's hard to understand what the numbers mean, but basically, the further up you go, the more that wealth matters. The further down you go, the less that wealth matters, until you get down to single-party state. This one's kind of unique and different, but we won't talk about this one. It's kind of unique. Anarchy, you can see, has minus 75% political strength from wealth. So there's no... wealth does not play much of a role in an anarchist state, which I guess makes sense, right? But on census suffrage, you need to have a certain amount of wealth to even be able to vote, and you also... derive most of your legitimacy from votes. Based on universal suffrage is even more. It's 110 based on votes. So in our current government, wealth plays a somewhat minor role in people's voting, and as such, by pure population count, peasants are huge, and that's why the yeoman farmers are really strong. The yeoman farmers are going to support laws that are based on their inherent ideologies. That's the red ones, particularist, isolationist, and Jeffersonian. And then they have a leader, and the leader has an ideology of his own, this blue one, and that always overwrites whatever the red ones are if they conflict. So if for whatever reason the farmers, let's say, they were anti-slavery in one of these basic ones, this guy being a slaver would overwrite that, which means they will endorse slave trade. Thus, if we wanted to pass slave trade, it'd be very easy because the farmers are very powerful. In order to go woke, we need to get interest groups that support woke stuff. Now when it comes to what's woke, I'm assuming we're talking about women's suffrage. We're talking multiculturalism, right? We're talking about maybe workers' protections if we're going more left woke. We're talking healthcare. And you can check what interest groups support what by looking over here. This little endorsement thing, the stuff on the right are the groups that support it. So if you wanted to get women's suffrage, I believe no one wants it right now. So no one wants it right now because we haven't researched feminism. We'll get to that in a second. But nobody wants women's rights right now, unfortunately. So that we can't really do that. If we check something like multiculturalism, same deal. Nobody wants that right now because we don't have the technology, the society technology to have unlocked that stuff. Speaking of which, we can now transition to talking about one of Jillian's more ill-fated blunders, I guess you could say, which was to rush for feminism. Now, what's funny about this, I'm going to be a little bit contrarian, I guess you could say. It is bad to rush for a tier 3 tech because you're wasting a lot of research time on something where you could have been researching other techs at less cost. Because tier 2 tech is cheaper than tier 3 tech. And you can tell what the tier is by these little Roman numerals. So if you go down here, that's tier 4, that's tier 5, right? When you research any higher tier tech without having all the previous tiers, you get a big penalty. So you see, it's taking 7 years to research feminism, but it'll only take us 3 years to research organized sports, right? But the thing is, Victoria 3 is a game about having fun, because it's a video game. So if you want to just rush for feminism, just do that. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that. And if anything, if your entire goal in the game is to just, be woke and get women's rights or whatever, then, just go get feminism. Why are you don't have to obsess over doing everything right, you know? You can do things a little bit wrong if it suits your build better. So in the spirit of that, we're going to research feminism. Once we research this will unlock the ability to even get women's suffrage, first of all. But second of all, it'll unlock access to political movements that will support feminism. So right now, these are our current political movements, and we'll talk about these more in depth a little bit later. But once we unlock feminism, we can actually have a feminist political movement, and that will influence the chances that there will be a feminist that might take control of any of our interest groups. Another thing we're going to do before we unpause is we're going to talk about authority. So Jillian has spent her authority on consumption taxes, and this is fine. This is one way, by the way, to extract wealth from a capitalist, is you look at what they consume. Remember earlier I mentioned those capitalists were consuming coffee? Well, if we want to take money away from them, we can put a consumption tax on what they consume, which in this case is coffee, and it's making about 2,000 pounds. That's nice. Other consumption taxes are not so good. This T1 is only making 0.01 thousand pounds of revenue for 100 authority. Question is, what can you use authority for instead? Well, a lot of things, a lot of stuff. We're going to take off this tea consumption tax because it's kind of bad. It's not making us much money. We're going to also take off the liquor one. It's not making us much money either. And instead we're going to use this authority on decrees. So a decree is like a little buff that you give to a state. So we know we have a bunch of wine in New York, and thus I'm going to put an agricultural industry decree here, which will increase the throughput on wine. Real quick, what's throughput? Okay. Throughput is an increase to the inputs and the outputs of a building. So in the case of a vineyard, there is no input. They don't have any goods that come in. They just make wine and they take wages. So this is especially good because we're getting effectively more wine for the same amount of wages, and that means more profit. In other businesses, like say in Pennsylvania, if we were to put a decree down on this lumber, then we would be taking up more tools, but also making more lumber. And you're paying the same wage, which is why it's very effective to use throughput, because when you consume more tools, that might make you think, oh no, we're losing profits, right? But remember, you're also making the tools, so you're going to gain profits in here and lose profits in here, but you'll also just be making more goods in general, which is, you know, better. It means you can make a larger economy overall. So with that in mind, we're going to put down a resource industry decree right here in Pennsylvania, where we have a lot of mines. And then, since we're building there, we're going to put road maintenance. This increases state construction efficiency, so that's pretty nice. So put that down there. Beautiful. I just want to clarify real quick that throughput usually does not cause a loss in profits. Generally speaking, being able to consume more goods and then thus produce more goods while paying the same wages will result in a better profit on the business. It's more to say that throughput isn't something like a free bonus to outputs. It's an increase in efficiency, as you can use and produce more goods for the same number of workers and the same wages. Some nations have plenty of workers and don't care about this very much. Others are starved for workers. What's more, though, is that a building costs construction to build, and so the higher throughput there is on a building, the more total economic consumption and economic output you're getting per constructed building. Basically, overall, higher throughput just makes everything more efficient in a more difficult to see but nonetheless valuable way. This is another example of how Victoria 3 doesn't really emphasize its more important mechanics very well. You can also use authority to bolster or suppress political movements, but it's very expensive. So let's say that I was trying to do like a more liberal playthrough. I would right click here, I would hit bolster, this would increase the support on the liberal movement, and this will cause there to be a higher likelihood that we would get, say, like a market liberal in charge of the industrialists. You can see here that, okay, it's hard to do the tooltip. Okay, it's a difficult task. There you go. You can see here that like movement pressure plus 193, there are movements that are pressuring this interest group to have a market liberal or a liberal, you know, whatever, right? Like it's basically you can just bolster movements with your authority. We'll do that later once we actually get a feminist. I'm also going to real quick just get rid of some of these random agitators who are authoritarians, because I'm not interested in what they're trying to do. They want to get rid of voting, and they want to do a lot of not woke stuff. We're just going to exile these guys. Exile, and then we can also imprison this guy. We're going to imprison him for 10 years. See you later, buddy. I glossed over agitators when I was recording, but to quickly explain, these are characters who arrive in a nation and provide significant support to a political movement of their choice, generally one that aligns with their ideology. Agitators can be given control of interest groups with the click of a button, or turned into generals where they can gain popularity for winning battles. They can also be exiled or imprisoned, which will just get rid of them. If you're looking to guide the politics of your nation, agitators can be very important, but they're very random. Some games, you'll just get a million authoritarians. Other games, you might get none. It's another one of Victoria 3's many random mechanics that keep each game interesting in my opinion. That said, it's not fully random, as once again, you can use your authority to bolster or suppress movements, and the more powerful a movement is, the more likely an agitator of that type will spawn, and you can also look to the list of exiled agitators in the whole world, and based on your openness of your borders, you can invite those people in to act as agitators for your nation. Jillian also promised to pass tenant farmers, and I don't like tenant farmers very much, but I don't want to fail like their requests, so I'm going to try to pass it anyway, because it's just not, it would suck to get the negative effects from failing this. What you just saw me do there, by the way, was negotiate with the petite bourgeoisie, where I gave them some more political power in return for them supporting the law. It's not a very complicated system. Don't worry about this. It's not a very complicated system. You just click, and then you can get an option to get them to give their clout to support the law. The way this works is that success chance is just the clout of all supporting interest groups added up together. So 12.6 plus 17.5. The stall chance is the clout of every interest group that's against the law, multiplied by a number based on how upset they are about it. So in the case of the yeoman farmers, they're only at -7. I think if they go to -8, then they would be like times 1.5 or something. The advanced chance and the debate chance are the leftover amounts. So if you have like more success than stall, the leftover chance will be advance, which means you get a positive outcome that will increase your success chance. And then a debate is the other end of that. It's like it's the neutral option. A debate is usually like you can gain success, but it'll cost you some kind of negative, that kind of thing. So here we see we got a debate. So you can tell it's labeled here, it says debate. This gives us, we can basically pay for some negative approval on the yeoman farmers, but we can enact the law faster, or we just make it take longer. If we make the yeoman farmers more upset, they're going to increase their stall chance, but I like getting the law faster, so we'll do that. They actually didn't. I guess they're already unhappy. I think it's -10 when they get angry enough that it would make it even worse. I think so, but whatever, it's fine. Important note that I didn't go over. Interest groups only add their clout to a law they approve of if they're in government, and they will always add their clout to the stall chance of a law that they don't approve of, whether in government or not. And I didn't exactly go over how forming governments works, but basically, interest groups will, if you have elections, create parties and work together to earn votes. Based on your voting laws, as outlined before, the number of votes they earn, combined with the wealth of their supporters, generates them a clout number with the importance of wealth versus votes depending on your exact laws. When you form a government, a confluence of numbers will determine the legitimacy of the government. Thus, you can make a government of whatever combo of interest groups you want, but a low legitimacy government will make a lot of radicals and be very slow at passing laws, so you have to balance it. What I do want to do real quick is I want to be friends with Britain because they're pretty cool. And I'm going to tell you a little secret, okay? I want an alliance with Britain because that would help keep us safe from the Confederates, and we could one day use that to fight the Confederates. The problem, of course, is that they don't want to accept because we don't have a very big army. Here's the thing, though. America has a big population, and on account of that, you can, like, kind of trick the AI into thinking you're more powerful than what you are. What you do is you go over to an army, you go to the conscripts. Conscripts are units that you only use when you're at, like, when you choose to raise them for war. They're not, like, permanently on the field, right? So we can raise 242 conscripts, but keep in mind, these guys do not cost us anything. They don't employ anybody unless we go to war and we click the raise conscripts button. Thing is, if you look at our army power, it looks like we have like a crap ton of army. So now if I talk to Britain, he's a lot more willing to accept the alliance because our power projection is suddenly much higher. This is, I guess, a little bit exploity, but like, I don't know, it's not a big deal. It's a nice little thing you can do. What I want with Britain is I want trade privileges because they can buy our wine potentially. So you want to get trade privileges. And then I also want investment rights in them if they're willing to give me that. This could be a bit of a tough sell. I'm going to offer them like no tariffs on stuff because we don't really care about tariffs anyway. Again, Victoria 3 is a hell of a beast. Tariffs and subventions kind of don't really matter that much. Like they can matter a little bit, but it's not really a big deal. Could give them investment rights. Now here's the thing. Let me talk about investment rights real quick. Remember I mentioned that profits generate investment pool? Well, the profits on the building go to the owners. And if the owners are local Americans, then the American investment pool is the one that gets it. If the owners are British, though, then the British investment pool gets it. So if I give investment rights to Britain, then that means they can make buildings in my country, and those buildings will pay their dividends, like their profits, to Britain's investment pool, which will make them stronger. On the vice versa, if they give me investment rights, and then I'm building in their country, then the buildings I make over there will give their profits to my investment pool. So, this means that whoever you give investment rights to can kind of like drain your nation of profits in theory, and vice versa, of course. Because we have like very few profits, we don't want the British to steal our profits by building our buildings for us and potentially buying them out from under us. So we don't want to give away investment rights because we have a problem. In a playthrough where you have a big investment pool and you just can't spend it all, then it's more okay. Because then it's like, well, the British will build buildings in the country and they'll take some of our profits, but we have plenty to spare, and they're also going to be like generating GDP for us. Because remember, whatever buildings they make in our country, that's GDP for the nation, right? There's also resources for our market. So it's nice to have. But we want to get profits, so we'd like to get their investment rights and then not give them back. What I might do is just say no trade privileges. Maybe that's how we fix this up. Yeah, so now they're going to accept if we just don't do the trade privileges, and like, that's fine. Like, whatever, right? We're giving them a power block embassy. What this does is make so that maybe we can join their power block, but that's probably not going to happen. This is more just like me trying to convince the AI. I just think that's kind of stupid. There we go, the Newcastle Convention. I could have given it a name, but I just didn't bother. Now what we can do, we'll look at this in a minute, but let's just say there's some economic opportunities in India we can make use of, but don't worry about that for now. For now, we're going to focus on the industrialization, because I want to show like a more traditional kind of path to industrialization, but then we're going to use the fact that in the investment pool is like a monolith to our advantage for a strategy in a moment. And one thing I'll say is that we're on speed 5, we're kind of just going through the game here. Victoria 3 is just like very slow paced at times. So I know it might seem a little boring, but this is kind of just how the game is. And it's a valid critique to say that like, oh, Victoria 3 is too slow for me. That's completely fine. I think that anyone can have their preferences, right? For me, it's kind of fun to have this slow burn type of game, but we're kind of just waiting to make mines right now. And once those mines get built, they will contribute to the economy very effectively, and that's really good. We also just got a mass migration. We should talk about that for a second. So here in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of resources. There's 120 possible coal mines. We've only built 9 of them, about to be 10. We only have 130,000 peasants left. So we're running out of people. And one thing America is really good at is getting people to migrate over. So to help make that even better, we're going to put a greener grass campaign, which gives more immigration attraction down in Pennsylvania, and also in New York, because we want to get more pops here. Now, what those do is it encourages people in the market, which includes like basically just my territory plus my subjects, so Oklahoma and Liberia, which is an American colony at this time. These places are in the market. This will encourage people to move from other places into these places, and that's fine. But the bigger thing is that it will encourage people to come in from overseas. So if you look at the mass migration map mode, which is this mass migration attraction, we can see we already have people coming in from Hamburg into, is that Indiana? Yes, I do know American geography, huge. This will encourage people to come from overseas into the country as well, and we really want that. We want to get Europeans to move over here. So we're hoping that we're going to get some mass migrations into Pennsylvania and New York by putting that down. Now, this isn't necessarily like a dire need. We still have lots of people around, but in the future, we're going to want more, so it's nice to get that done now, right? This is getting to a more advanced piece of information, but effectively, the maximum possible size of your economy can be considered to be limited by your population and your available raw materials. You can build infinite textile mills in a state, but you will eventually run out of the arable land required for cotton and dyes, and run out of workers too. This is why population can be very important, but if we're being real here, 95% of players never make such a huge economy that they end up running out of people or resources. You have to really be tryharding for that. Nonetheless, it's a good thing to try and be aware of. So as we're building these lumber mills, we're probably wondering about stuff like, it's all nationally owned, right? So we're wondering about stuff like maybe privatization. What's the point of privatization, you might be wondering? And this is a good question. The thing about anything being owned by the government is that Victoria 3, in its very liberal, I guess it's very liberal way of looking at economics, anytime the government owns anything, it kind of just is a little inefficient. So if we look here at interventionism, on this law, we have 50% of government dividends go to reinvestment. So that means that half the money they make goes into the investment pool, and that's fine. That's completely efficient. That's okay. But then we have 25% government dividends efficiency. And what this means, we can look at how that works by looking at this lumber camp. We have a 2.7 thousand weekly balance here, okay? And the government dividends is 967. But if we actually look at how much money we're going to be making for our budget in the dividends section, it's only 835. Although the math is like weird. The dividend efficiency is 48.24% currently, so we're getting like half the money in theory. But essentially, like the money going into the government budget is actually less than what it should be based on the profits. So some money is being like vaporized into nothing, is what I'm saying, essentially. And that's inefficient, so we don't like that. The reason to privatize is that you'll be converting more money into investment pool, which it means that you can't use it as readily, but you're losing less of it overall. Now, in my opinion, because the investment pool will just make more buildings, it's only good for you to have more investment pool. You just have less control over what it's making. So we see here our current investment pool is making a shipyard in New Jersey, don't really care about that, and it's making a railway in Agra, which is like, okay, right? Maybe that'll make some profits over there. So you lose control of the economy, but in return you get a more efficient economy. That's effectively what it is to privatize. Now, in my opinion, the meta is to like pretty much always be privatizing. But, you know, you need to know how to manipulate the private sector a bit to kind of make that work, which can be a bit of a task. Because if you have prices set in such a way that the capitalists always build what you were always going to build anyway, then it's fine, right? You just have to manipulate it. But that's more like advanced tactics. Anyway, the lumber camps are getting built. That's going to help a lot with our construction costs. We can see that the budget is already back to being almost positive. It's fluctuating based on how much of the investment pool is being used by or rather how much of the building costs are being taken on by the investment pool at any given moment. But like the GDP is climbing a little bit. It's pretty slow because we're not exactly industrialized right now, and the budget is getting better. Remember, it was like minus 40k before, now it's like minus 12k. So things are getting better, right? Now here's the thing. Since we have investment rights in Britain, we have a special way we can make a lot of money really fast. Now, in normal Victoria 3 runs, I would not do this because it's a little bit, I guess we could say, cheap. It's not exploity, it's that it's overpowered, it's unbalanced is the problem, right? What you can do is, India's got a lot of opium, and the British, they love selling opium overseas to China. So what you can do is you can go over here and you can build up their railways for them so they have infrastructure, like so. Okay. And then you can just build like a ton of opium. And this stuff makes so much money. It makes so much money, it's insane. And remember, we're gonna own it in our national ownership. So that means that some of it's going to go right into our dividends through the government dividends here, but other of it is going to go into the investment pool. And the investment pool will then get really rich. So for the purpose of fulfilling the woke agenda most effectively here, because I want to try and play well here, we're going to make just a ridiculous amount of opium over in India to fund the woke. Is that a commentary on the woke world? I don't know. You tell me. Despite the fact that the demand might be kind of low on this opium, it's just so profitable that it doesn't matter what the price is. It just always makes money. Normally what you do is, as England, you get this Hong Kong treaty port, and this allows you to build trade centers here, which will import opium into China. And China, thanks to their obsession with opium, you can see here, the Han have an obsession on opium. They will buy this no matter what the price is. They will throw their lives away to buy it. Same way that the Americans do it. So if you look at our RPOPs over here in America, we have an obsession with coffee. And small arms too, by the way. But the coffee obsession means that no matter how expensive this is, no matter how like difficult it is to obtain, they will purchase it, like always. So that's also why Jillian's wine economy doesn't work very well, because technically wine and coffee are like a substitution good for each other. So the American like Yankees will pretty much always prefer coffee over wine. And what's funny is that the Confederates don't have an obsession with coffee. They have an obsession with tobacco, which is not a substitution good for wine. So, well, I guess it can be actually, but it's actually a better good. But regardless, it fulfills a different need. It's not. They can use it as a luxury drink instead of as an intoxicant. So actually, by losing the South, I guess we did lose a significant customer base, but we can always reclaim that, right? Now, one thing I'm coming across here is that it's taking a long time to build these railways. Now, railways take a while to build, so that's fine. The opium plantations are much faster. You can tell because a railway costs 800 construction, whereas an opium plantation costs 200. Sorry about this bug. There you go, I fixed it. Opium plantations only cost 200. So, they build about in a quarter of the amount of time. Nonetheless, okay, I'm going to be a little bit of a smart cookie. So I know that soon we're going to get a lot of investment pool because those opium plantations are going to go really hard. That means that I can probably afford to go into a little bit more debt in order to get more construction and do this faster. So because Victoria 3 is a relatively short game, in the sense that it's only 100 years, it means that doing things quickly has significant value. So I'm going to build construction sectors in Ohio and Pennsylvania, understanding that I probably can't actually afford them right now, but that thanks to the opium I'm going to build very soon, I will be able to afford them in the future. That's the idea behind this play. Getting feminism in 5 more months. It's very exciting, because once we have feminism, we can start getting women's suffrage, which we will then use to put a woman in charge. Now, here's where I got to talk a little bit about randomness in Victoria 3. So what I'm hoping for, crossing my fingers, is that we end up with some kind of like Susan B. Anthony or Florence Nightingale or like Harriet Tubman, like any sort of historical figure that's like a woman that would be interesting to make the president, and then maybe, you know, like a monarch at some point. That'd be kind of funny, right? You know, we'll see what we can do with it. But sometimes in Victoria 3, you just don't get the luck that you need to get the thing that you want. You just like get screwed, right? Sometimes that happens. You don't get what you need. And if that does happen, I think it's fun to just roll with the punches and make things work anyway. But, you know, we're gonna hope. I've already actually recorded this video like once, and I never got Susan B. Anthony. And I was like, okay, I really want her to spawn. So I said, I'm gonna try again. I'm gonna do the whole video again in the hopes that she spawns this time. And we're hoping that that happens. By the way, as you can see here, the opium is being built. We also got feminism a second ago. We'll talk about that in a minute. Opium is being built. We have a lot of levels here. And just look at the investment pool gaining size. Okay. Now, we're getting like 10,000 pounds in here just from the opium by itself. Everything else is helping, but 10k just from the opium. Pretty good. Now, what's happening here, you see, my debt's increasing. And it's expensive to maintain, you know, all this construction. I'm going to go a little bit longer because I want to get some of the more opium built here so we can get more profits. But soon, I'm actually going to pause construction and hope that my investment pool can maybe keep building without me needing to support it. Because now that we have this opium, we do have a significantly higher investment pool, but it's still not enough. We still need more, but, you know, we'll get there. Right, so I want to talk about feminism. So because you see here, remember I looked at the political movements earlier. We now have a feminist movement, and this is important. To explain how these work in terms of what they're abstracting, because I think it's important to know when you play these games, like kind of what things are, right? These are bottom-up political movements. So this is like the people are feminists, the people support the labor movement, that kind of thing. Interest groups are like the government. They're like the power holders. So this is like top-down ideology. So the fact that the yeoman farmers are authoritarians means that like there's a guy with significant power in the government who wants, you know, to get rid of voting and stuff like that, right? But the people don't necessarily support it. They're not necessarily here. But they don't have like the liberal movement would not be happy if I were to try and get rid of voting. So the people would be upset because we have a liberal movement in the country. If we didn't have this, then we'd have no real roadblock to becoming authoritarian. Now we have a feminist movement. The question is, how can we make them more powerful? Well, we can bolster them using our authority, right? So I'm going to take off this coffee tax, and I'm going to take off a couple of my decrees from before. We'll take off like maybe the road maintenance from here, and we can take off maybe one of these migration decrees, though I do like those, though. I kind of don't want to. We'll take off the agricultural decree. Now, I can bolster the feminists. This will increase their support. Now, what support does, as mentioned before, it's going to increase the chance that a leader will be a humanitarian or a feminist. Because feminist movements unlocks access to feminists and humanitarians. So, the way that you mitigate luck in this game is you have to spend resources like authority in order to increase or decrease, you can also do, the chances of things happening how you want them to. On our industrialists right now, we have a 3% chance of a feminist. Pretty low. But we can get that to be a bit higher if we bolster the interest group, which we are now doing. We have a new election coming, and because of the universal suffrage... Okay, another coup, dude. They don't stop with the coups. Because of the universal suffrage, the farmers are getting a lot of power because so many of our people are like peasants and farmers and stuff, right? Now, what's funny is that the farmers are still run by a massive authoritarian. So, like, I kind of want to actually reduce our voting laws because currently, we actually want the trade unions, industrialists, and intelligentsia, the Republican Party, to gain power because they're more likely to have feminists. See here, 26% chance humanitarian, 6% chance feminist. On the industrialists, we have a 5% chance of feminist, still quite low, but the trade unions, 50% humanitarian. Like, we want to get those ideologies, right? So, universal suffrage works against us here because universal suffrage means they're just going to vote for all the conservative stuff. You know, it doesn't really work that well for us. We want to get something like wealth voting, maybe. And the funny thing is that the current government would support it, but in so doing, they would be harming their own interests, which is why victory can be weird sometimes. But essentially, I'm going to go over here. We're going to reduce the voting rights down to maybe like just wealth voting. probably makes the most sense. We'll do that. And it's going to be super easy to pass because the whole government is approving of it. What might happen, though, is that the liberals might not like it, but they don't care that much. See, liberals, they're just like, it sucks, but they're not very angry. Note this radical supporters count here. Because the number of supporters is not, like, the people aren't really that radicalized. And this is part of how we've been running our economy better. So there hasn't been as much radicalization happening anymore. If we had, like, a worse economy and everyone had bad standard of living and the whole world was suffering, there might be more radicalism, but things are kind of chill right now. That's nice. Also, the opium continues to thrive. How's the investment pool? We see that finally, we actually are building up an investment pool. And this is because look at how much more reinvestment we have. Remember when it was like 20K earlier on? Now it's 84K. 31K of that is coming straight from the opium. So if you want to, like, I don't like doing this strat every game because it's boring. To be clear, Paradox games to me are like sandboxes, right? This is extremely effective, making opium. Really, really good. But it's boring. So I'm doing it in this run because we're trying to achieve something great for Jillian's game here. But if you're playing the game for the first time, I'd recommend maybe just like don't just build opium because it's just not really that interesting. But regardless, what I'm going to do now is let a couple more of these finish, and then I'm going to pause construction and pay off our debt a little bit because our debt's a little bit high and it's a little bit annoying. One thing that's a bit not so good about doing this is that when we build stuff in India, we don't actually increase our GDP, and GDP increases your debt cap. So it is nice to build things in your own country if you can, but in this case, the economic opportunity afforded to us by building opium in India is really good, even if it buffs up their GDP rather than ours. It's just kind of like, well, the investment is kind of insanely strong. But this is one thing I really wish Victoria 3 was better about, which is like the feedback. It doesn't feel right now like we're gaining a bunch of power by putting opium down in India, because it's hidden away in this reinvestment number. This is the power of the opium, is this 34K right here. But, like, who would even know that unless they were, like, experienced with the game, right? I think Victoria 3 has a lot of work to do when it comes to explaining its mechanics better to new players. It's just something that, I don't know, like, I'm passionate about this game quite a bit, and there are a lot of things that should be improved on it that are not improved that feel like no-brainers. But, well, I say that, I don't know exactly how you could change it to make this more apparent, but it should be explained in some way, like some more front-facing explanation of like, hey, this is important. It's this investment pool. Maybe wealth voting coming in here, by the way. Let's see. Could be wealth voting. Huge. There it is. Okay. So this means we get more authority, by the way, which we can put those decrees back down, which is nice. I do like them. Let's put those back down. And this is why having less election law is kind of nice, is because of the extra authority, but also it's going to make it so these guys probably get more votes, because we have a lot of rich capitalists in our country at this point. At this point, we have enough investment pool that I'm going to pause construction, and we should see that now we make a big budgetary gain, right? And the investment pool will drain a little bit. But see how it's not draining very much? Right now, we can afford, more or less, to just like coast on this. We can let the investment pool build whatever it wants to build, and it'll build stuff whether in Britain or over here, whatever it wants to do, and we just like sit here with paused, and all our construction is still being used. So we're not losing any construction, we're just giving up control of it to pay off our debt. Yeah, we're gonna pay off our debt now, and we're gonna let the opium fund the investment pool, and we're just gonna sit here and pay off our debt. Nothing to worry about. And once we paid off our debt, by the way, we can start constructing again. We won't have any more interest payments to pay, and we can just make more opium. And we can just make even more. I'm trying to think of, like, when I make this video, like, I'm just going to make the thumbnail, like, depending on how things go with regards to getting, like, a female president and all that, it's going to be, like, the opium queen or something. I don't know. I think it'll be a funny bit. There's Susan Anthony. Okay, hold on. Speaking of funny bits, there's Susan Anthony. Okay. Now, we're having an election pretty soon, I think. We're going to hope that the Republicans will be doing well so that we can put Susan Anthony in charge of the intelligentsia and she can be like Giga Chad. If we look at the chances of her becoming the leader, it's still 0, unfortunately. I guess, oh, right, because we don't have women's suffrage yet. Yeah, okay, hold on, sorry. I'm skipping steps here. We can't possibly make Susan Anthony a leader in the country until we actually have women's suffrage. So we're going to start passing this. The chance to pass it is basically entirely carried by the feminist movement, and we also see the Protestant traditionalist movement is going to be opposing it. Now, we can't really, I guess we can take off our suppression of the supremacists, we can put it onto the Protestant traditional movement, so that way they can lose support. This support number is how much percentage they're going to be taking away or adding to the success of the stuff they support or oppose. So we're going to suppress them, that way they have less power. It means the American supremacists will get power again, but it's okay. They don't actually oppose feminism, they just oppose, like, you know, like multiculturalism and all that. So we can see here that thanks to our wealth voting, now the Republican Party is actually winning the election, which is great because we prefer the Republican Party. This is why it's not always best to go straight for if you want to be like super liberal, you don't always just want to go straight for full-throated universal suffrage, because people do like conservative interest groups, like that. The people like that stuff until they get out of the peasants, like until we stop having a lot of peasants and stuff, right? We still have, if we look at our population, still have 2 million peasants. That's a lot of votes, you know? So it's useful to go up to wealth voting to get a more progressive party in charge. So our new president is Asa Forbes, who is himself a feminist, okay? So he's going to be the man that, you know, pushes for women's rights. We also have a humanitarian intelligentsia, a humanitarian trade union. It's kind of base, to be honest. Let's go for this. Yeah, 97% chance to pass. Wow. That's insane. Right, because the president has this ideology. So the ideology of the president significantly impacts your ability to do laws. These are all mechanics I just don't think about, but I just know them inherently. Because the president is a feminist, plus 20% chance to pass, easy. So now, it's really easy to get women's suffrage. And this is all because we chose to bolster the women's movement to give it enough power that now it can do this. We can see here that we could give Susan Anthony leadership, but, you know, she has to, again, paradox syntax is kind of weird. She has to either not be a woman, or we have to have women's suffrage. Now, we can't change her to not being a woman. It's a little bit too early for that level of wokeness, but we can get women's suffrage, so we'll get that. I'm going to at this point unpause construction because our investment pool has drained and we have paid off most of our debt, and in fact, because our interest payments are gone now, because we have, you know, like we've actually paid off our debt, we still have for a little while we had a positive budget, but you can see like we're barely losing money from the budget, and that's okay. So now we can just focus on making even more opium to supplement our income even more, and it's going to be wonderful. Also, it looks like the East India Company was dissolved, and now the the opium is now farmed mostly by the locals, which is kind of funny, but that's fine. Ooh, here it is. Boom. Okay, great. What this actually gives, by the way, in terms of mechanics, is it reduces birth rate but gives workforce ratio. This is a very powerful modifier, but to be clear, once again, we're not playing by the meta. In the early game, birth rate is usually better because you can get more population for the late game. And then what you want to do is you want to have like all these kids, and then eventually swap over to women's suffrage to get the workforce ratio so you can have more people in the workforce. But again, we're here to be woke. We're not here to be effective, okay? That said, it's not like it's horribly ineffective. It's not like we're killing. We're not throwing or anything like that, okay? It's fine. Before we put Susan Anthony in charge, I noted one thing. So we can put her in charge right now, I'm pretty sure. Yes, we could. And she would become the leader of the intelligentsia, but she wouldn't necessarily become the president, because the president will be whoever has the most clout in government of the most popular party. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to first pass multiculturalism, which might be a bit difficult. Yeah, maybe a little bit. But we're going to do that because the current leader of intelligentsia is a humanitarian. We also have a humanitarian trade union guy, and then the petit bourgeoisie aren't humanitarian, but they're currently like appeased by us passing women's suffrage, so it'll be easier to pass this. And then we can maybe negotiate. Not really, it looks like. It's kind of cringe. Maybe I can lower taxes to be more like amenable. Let's see. Yeah, now we can get the industrialists to support it, so that's big. And then we can also get the southern planters to not oppose it. I will tell them we'll put them in charge of the treasury, sure, that's fine. And then I can also convince the petit bourgeoisie not to oppose it. Okay, great. I'll invest in light industries. That sounds good. And there we go. So we made these promises, essentially, to appease the people to get multiculturalism. Now, multiculturalism is very nice for immigration because people are going to be like, oh, I'm not discriminated over there. We'll just migrate over. It makes getting migrants way easier. So we should see people like filing in all the way from like India into America, and then once we get multiculturalism. Now, to be clear, this isn't like a guaranteed pass by any means. It's not like we're 100% going to pass this, but it's looking pretty good. Statistically speaking, we should pass this pretty easily. The nice thing about this law is it's relatively quick to pass. I think we'll be able to pass it before the supremacists can like really get anywhere. They have 93% activism. At 100%, they can actually cause a civil war. But like, once you pass the law, their activism will begin decaying. So I'm pretty sure that like this will just kind of, you know, pass before we have to worry about anything. Maybe. Huge. There we go. So now you're going to see that this activism will slowly decay because this is going to slowly go down over time. It's this 75%. So nothing to worry about anymore. Now I'm going to put Susan Anthony in charge. And leadership. And now we have her in government. Now she won't be the president unless we have to hope that the party kind of splits a little bit. So we want maybe like Yeah, it's going to be difficult to make Susan Anthony the most powerful. But what we can do, here's one way, here's how the politics of Victoria 3 work, right? Is that pops will support interest groups based on their job. Now, what pops tend to support the intelligentsia? It's pretty easy to guess it's the academics, right? So what we can do is we can make a bunch of academics who will hopefully be quite rich, which they are middling, so they're somewhat rich. We could just build a bunch of universities, and that will create a bunch of people who will then give their wealth clout to Susan Anthony. So we're going to spam those down, which means that we probably have to stop making opium at some point. But it's too tempting, though. I guess I will prioritize building universities. Now, building universities isn't even a bad idea. They do like give technology and stuff, so it's not even like this is a bad play. It's just that it'll be kind of expensive because remember, universities are a government building, so we're paying for the universities in terms of the cost of the wages, the cost of the goods. Like we're covering the costs on this, but that's fine, right? Okay, so now, unfortunately, the way that the parties have splintered, it looks like the Democrats are going to win, which is interesting. I guess because we don't have a ton of really wealthy pops yet that are supporting the Republicans, because the Republicans fractured after this recent election. They split up. Now we have Susan Anthony's intelligentsia and the trade unions together, and then the industrialists have gone off on their own. And because the parties split, the Democrats are going to be able to win. Now, it's unlikely we'll get random events that will give us enough momentum for this to win, but I mean, it's okay. There's not a huge rush to get Susan Anthony in charge. Although I say that, she is a little bit old. What is she, 44? That's not that old, but she could potentially, die, and that would be really sad. So we'll hope that doesn't happen. We had a new election now. We have a new president, Montgomery Dana. And what's interesting is that because we have an authoritarian, we could once again reduce our voting laws and then maybe just go more authoritarian. And if you go more authoritarian, we could just install Susan Anthony as the leader, which is an idea. I want to see if maybe we can do this, if we can just get her elected instead, because it's more of a pain in the ass to do it the other way. We've got a huge investment pool now, by the way, so what I want to do at this point is I want to pause construction. And we're going to say that even when we're paused, we're still building up investment pool. So what do we do about that? Well, we can just make more construction and then just not use it ourselves. We can just do that. In fact, we can even do even more. This is how good opium is, dude. This is how insane the opium is. It's just, it doesn't stop, man. In fact, have we managed to privatize any of it? Looks like no. It's all, well, some of it, yeah. See how some of it's getting bought out by manor houses? This means it's getting even more efficient, so we love to see that. Let's make even more construction then, because clearly our investment pool can afford it. We have a Korean migration to Pennsylvania. That's huge. We see a lot of cultures coming in here. This is all multiculturalism's fault. There's lots of new people coming in, which is great. Ryukyuan mass migration. Hell yeah, dude. The Indiana Ryukyuan community. Shout out to my Indianan Ryukyuan folks. Shout out. We unlocked a new company, by the way, and this is interesting what to use the company on. Obviously, Jillian's wine company is kind of our big thing. We can actually look at their graph. We haven't looked at that yet. We should see that it's gotten quite nice. So you see here's the profit. As we've been able to get them to be able to buy the vineyards, and they're also buying banana plantations apparently too, they've been getting more and more profits, which is very nice to see. We can make another company, but I don't really know what we want to make per se. We don't have a good idea of exactly what economic build we're going for, but it's hard to say no to Carnegie. So we're probably just going to do Carnegie. We got to research open hearth process for that, so let's go grab that real quick. That's this tech right here. Once we have that, we can make Carnegie, and iron, coal, steel are just kind of really good goods, so we'll make that. In terms of the point of companies, they provide buffs to your nation based on their prosperity bonus, which is unique to every company, but more importantly, they give huge throughput bonuses to any building they own. Essentially, companies are how you declare to the world what your economic specializations are. They also build more efficiently, so you get more buildings per construction sector when they build things. Overall, companies are very important to the game in terms of how they let you specialize the economy and get little buffs for yourself. You can also rename them, and that's always fun. It's actually really interesting to note here that, so the GDP graph looks kind of pitiful right now, I won't lie. This isn't terrible, but it's not very good, right? But it's important to note, we have 26.7 million total GDP in the country. Overseas, we own 31 million more. So we have 15 million pounds of GDP worth of just opium in India, and probably other smaller things. But the point is, we haven't been doing nothing, okay? We've been making GDP, but it's all overseas, and it's funding the investment pool, which is important. We have hit a point, though, where we drained the investment pool, but look how much construction we have now. Like, we can afford all this construction because we have that investment pool to drain from, which is super nice. That said, I'll tell you this. No shame at all in this. If you need to, just delete some construction. Like, maybe I'll just be like, you know what? -10. There you go. Delete some construction. That's totally fine, all right? There's no shame in that. If you feel like you overbuilt. Nothing wrong with that. Also, now we can do Carnegie. This will be, like, huge for our profits, by the way. He makes refined steel, so we'll do monopoly on steel. And then because of this, we can grant investment rights. And now we might be able to buy out like all the iron, coal, and steel off in like Britain, because we have investment rights over there too. See what happens, but it's pretty cool. I'm thinking I also want a, I'd like to get to Laissez-Faire maybe, because we could make more of our investment pool this way. This gives capitalist investment pool contribution efficiency. So Laissez-Faire means you have even less control over your economy because even more of your dividends, in fact all of them, go to reinvestment, and even more of your construction goes to private sector. But then all money from capitalists is more efficient and you get less interest rate. So I'm thinking maybe we want to go for that. Which means I'm going to see if I can invite... How about this guy? This is a Sotho animist, Amadi Mamohato. He's not an African American, to be clear. He's just an African guy who we can put in charge, and now we can use that to start enacting laissez-faire. There is unfortunately some war happening in India, and this is where there's an interesting, again, somewhat unspoken mechanic, which is like the stability of the places that you invest in. If in theory this East India modernist revolt wins, then they'll break free from the British market and they'll be like an independent India, right? Now that would affect significantly the prices of opium, because the British market is great for opium in terms of like giving a good price for it to make it profitable. If I were to suspect that the places I'm investing in also, they might go like communist. Communists love seizing foreign-owned businesses, and that would mean that I would lose all of my opium, right? So we need to be concerned about like, oh, like, well, will Britain lose control of India? Now it's looking like they're about to. This may just happen. That all said, it was still pretty worthwhile. We got a lot of money out of that opium, so I'm pretty happy that we invested in it, even if we were to lose it right now, which could be happening, maybe. Revolts are weird. They usually have a hard time actually winning, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, so the idea is occupy this. Now opium's price might crater. But the thing is, it's so profitable that even at minimum price, it still makes money. It just makes less money. So it's going to harm our investment pool, but not like horribly. Just like a little bit. Also, we might get laissez-faire here. That'd be kind of sick. Huge. There we go. So now we have even more efficient investment pool contributions. And then we also have a less interest rate. So it's even safer to be in debt. Okay, so the Republicans are neck and neck with the Democrats right now. It's really close. Now, if we still had... Okay, thankfully we're gonna win, but if we still had, like, you know... If we still had, like, Susan Anthony around, this would be the moment where she would become president, but alas. The big problem, though, is that the farmers are just really dominant in the party, so it's difficult to actually, like, get Susan Anthony to become president. Depends on what group she's part of. So the agitators can come with different interest group alignments. When she's part of the petite bourgeoisie, it's easier to make her more powerful. But when she's part of the, like anything else, it's not quite as good. When she's part of like the intelligentsia, it's not quite as good.
I didn't notice it immediately during the run, but Susan Anthony ended up retiring from politics relatively early on, and that's just one of those unfortunate random Victoria 3 moments. That said, I do have another save file which went unrecorded where I did have her as the Empress of America. Let's go look at that.
I have made Susan Anthony the Empress of America, but I just... the confluence of events to make it happen is really rare, and it's difficult to make it happen, like, you know, consistently. So it did happen. I just wasn't recording it because I was doing it as like a personal tutorial for Jillian, okay? But here, Susan Anthony, okay, the funny meme, lol. We have full women's suffrage, but we didn't actually get multiculturalism. I did put autocracy in, so she is like the absolute Empress of America, which to me is really cool. Like, I think that's a funny thing to do for sure. The whole government is full of ethno-nationalists, so she could become like the fascist, you know, dictator of America, which is just like, you know, there's just something funny about that. But yeah, in this run that I'm actually doing for this video, haven't been able to make it happen, unfortunately. Also, like, Ferret's attacked me a couple times, took some states, but I didn't care about them. We'll go back to that other run, but I just want you to know that, like, there's a lot of RNG in Victoria 3, so I'm trying to do, like, the cool, funny stuff, but it's just not always doable. That's just the nature of the game. I think at this point now, the next goal is going to be
to reconquer the Confederate States of America. That's probably the most reasonable, like, next goal. So, to do that, we can just attack them. I mean, like, we can just fight them, but we don't have much of an army right now. After we get open hearth process, I'm going to start focusing on military research. And we're going to grab, like, just whatever we need in order to get the advantage on the Confederates. And then we'll reclaim and, you know, make sure that all the black people are free off in the southern states. So, yeah, we'll queue that up. And, yeah, I think we'll do okay. We do have a black president now. The election just ended. And it looks like the petite bourgeoisie were the largest members of the Republicans. So there, a black president, not Afro-American. It's important to note this is like, he's from Africa. He's not even Christian. But yeah, black president. So there's a cool wokeism, I guess. But at this point, we have investment pool is just continuing to pile up. And we have even more reinvestment from like our new company, which is the Carnegie one. We still have the Opium contributing. Just a lot of things going really well for us. The budget is only a little bit negative, despite the fact that we are in fact building. And we've made like a ton of universities. So normally these are really expensive, but like, you know, we can afford it now because we actually have money in the, we're actually generating income off of our taxes and stuff. But I'm thinking like, just make even more opium, bro. Like, just make even more. The opium never stops, man. The opium must flow. And we're translating that money into buildings for our own nation through the investment pool, essentially. Although it is interesting, the investment pool really likes building in the British market, it looks like. Looking at the list of stuff here, this is all like stuff in Britain. Although Dynam is, yeah, they're part of the British market as their protectorate. But like, they're building anywhere but in America, which I guess is because the British have just such a huge market. It's always so profitable to build there. But if we ever wanted to like redirect this investment pool back to our country, we could just get rid of our agreement and stop, you know, we could renegotiate this and take off the investment rights, and then we wouldn't be able to build there anymore. But it's like, it's fine. We can just keep doing the investment pool. We can be the ones that build back home, and they can build overseas, and it's fine. We have a communist now, an intelligentsia communist. So, like, is communism woke? This is the thing. This is an important philosophical question to ask about. Woke, to me, is like liberalism, where it's like girl bosses like making businesses and like, you know, being like making money and doing their own thing. Communism is a kind of girl bossing. I think I can definitely understand that, but it's a different sort of thing. I think it's a different vibe. It's not the vibe we're going for. We're going for that more like laissez-faire liberal capitalist girl boss business owner type vibe, I think. So I don't think we'll do communist America. That said, a communist is useful because they like better tax laws. So we might want to get this guy anyway just for the better tax law. Well, I say that, actually I'm wrong. This guy does not support the better tax law, so never mind. We don't care then.
Quick talk on how communism affects the economy. You know how capitalists provide reinvestment to the investment pool? Well, with communism, the workers become the owners of the buildings, and as such they will take home most of the dividends for their own usage. Communism, as a result, sees the workers become incredibly rich and gain a lot of standard of living, which is nice as it increases how much stuff they consume, and will generally see the possible profits on most consumer industries like textiles and furniture go up. The problem is that workers invest way less of their money into the investment pool, and so we will generally see the investment pool shrink under communism. Thus, the place communism holds in the meta of Victoria 3 is for those people who want to maximize consumption in their market, and for those who want to maximize their standard of living, but it will nearly certainly result in a slower growing GDP. That said, any economic model can be used to achieve effective results both in standard of living and in GDP, it's just about which one is favored, I guess you could say. For that reason, you should pursue the economic model that best suits the story you want to tell in your game, rather than worrying about the meta too much.
So sometimes when you want to start using investment pool more, rather than making more construction sectors, you should instead update your production method. Now, whenever you change your construction type from iron frame to like steel frame or something, you're going to shake up your market massively because construction's a huge source of like demand, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish building the Statue of Liberty in 22 weeks. Statue of Liberty gives you migration attraction in every part of your country, which is kind of insane. Let that finish building. Then I'm going to swap to steel. I'm going to pause construction and let the investment pool sort out the new market before we, you know, like get back to building. Because everything's going to be super expensive for a bit. Anyway, we finished building the Statue of Liberty. So now I'm going to swap to steel frame buildings and then pause construction. And now, what should happen here is the investment pool will start draining super rapidly because everything's out of whack. Everything's the wrong price. but they're going to see how profitable it will be to make things like explosives and steel and stuff, and they're going to build them in America, hopefully. We'll see what they choose to do, but hopefully they do the right thing. Yeah, we can see that they're building a bunch of glass over in Maryland. So, like, see that they're building at home now, because there's big economic opportunities at home to fill the new construction good demand. So because of that, we actually are going to get stuff built in our actual country, which is wonderful. This is actually a perfect example of manipulating market prices to get our private sector to build what we want. I wanted the private sector to invest in profitable industrial businesses back home in America. So to do that, I created a market where the price of steel, glass, explosives, and other goods were high, and as such, the private sector saw more profits back home than over in the British market. Thus, it chose to build there. It's a very high skill level thing to build your market around manipulating prices to get your private sector to build what you want them to build. So I'd say you can probably just maybe experiment with this here and there, and one day learn some crazy strategies, but for now, don't think about it too much. Now we're hitting the part of the game where the GDP just starts really spiking, as you can see here, because we've industrialized and we have an investment pool, like we have everything that we need to go really big here, right? Things are getting like huge now, which is great. This is the part of the game where you get to have probably the most fun, I guess, is because now you have like a big economy, so you can do a lot of things with it. Even after making all that construction sectors, still gaining investment pool, like it's still a positive. Although actually no, it's a bit of a lie. It's not quite positive. It's draining slowly, but it's like breaking even. Like it's not even like it's not even like we've overextended ourselves here. Like it's just, you know, it's like breaking even. It's like woohoo, that's cool, you know. Love to see that. So I think it is time. I think it is time for the invasion of the Confederates. So let's build an army. The way you build an army is you have an army over here, and you pick a general. Let's go with Adna Chaffee. Sure. One thing we should also do when it comes to military, again, this is not like a military guide, but basically what I always do is just all these buttons, you pretty much just click them all. So like we give extra supplies, it means they consume more goods, but they get more stats. Even more supplies, even more goods. Also, wine input. Wait a minute. This is a way to make demand for wine. Is you give them luxurious supplies. Now they have wine, right? And then we can give them machine guns for again more effects. We can give them chocolate. We can give them tobacco. We can give them liquor. Give them. I guess we can't give them opium. So we've been building all this opium off in Britain, but keep in mind it's in the British market, so we don't actually have access to most of it. We could import it, but like we don't need it. It's okay. We could also get field hospitals, however I find recovery rate to be not very useful, so I'm not going to grab this. Now that army is going to be demanding wine, which actually is interesting, because that means that we might see profits on the wine finally rise. After so long, maybe wine will actually have a good price. It's funny that Jillian picked a wine build. She may have possibly picked the worst possible time in Victoria 3 history to do a wine build. So, you know, because now trade is so weak that it's like, well, skill issue, I guess. Although if we really wanted to do trade, we would have just built more of a navy. Like, it's not that trade is super duper weak, it's that in the past you could do trade just kind of like, you know, anyone could just do trade. Now, because it's so tied to the navy, if you're not specializing in making a big navy, then like you cannot really do trade. And as such, it's less effective than it used to be. So the army's almost ready. We have 177 battalions. They're just, you know, we have a little more to fill in here, because they take time to like to employ. I say reinforce. What they're really doing is they're employing is what's actually happening here. They take a bit of time to do that, but once they do, we will send them out to invade the Confederates. As previously mentioned, this is not a military guide, but for a quick rundown, because I'm just so nice like that, infantry are best at defending, artillery are best at attacking, and cavalry are best at occupying land as quickly as possible. Armies must have at least 50% infantry or else take penalties. The newly added Marine unit specializes in naval invasions, and for the purpose of the 50% infantry requirement, they also count as infantry. I'm not joking, that's about all you need to know for the army. Beyond that, just turn on mobilization options to get extra supplies and stuff so you can get more stats at the cost of needing to pay for more goods for your army. Generally speaking, the cost of extra goods for the army pays for itself in that you can end wars faster. Not to mention, more consumption of goods just means more profits for your businesses anyway, so if anything, war can be quite stimulating for the economy at times, assuming that you're winning. Let's do this, let's invade Mexico. Imagine that, look, the first war in the whole campaign, isn't this crazy? Now there might be immediately a bunch of shortages on the goods that these guys are going to consume, let's see. Yeah, so they need more ammunition. This is good, we can test out what our economic needs are for, you know, to raise this army. Give me a couple more munitions plants, and then we should have enough munitions to afford this army. Germany does join, but the Germans have, like, no navy. So I think that they are just kind of a non-factor. With 16 ships, they won't be able to bring their army over here. So I'm kind of just like, who cares? That's how I'm feeling about that. And I'm pretty sure my army just wipes the floor with Mexico's. They have 80 battalions. They have less attack and less defense. I have 264 battalions. I have way more attack, way more defense. Now, this army is expensive. As you can see here, the budget is tanking from the cost of all the bullets. That's fine, bro, because we're going to build up more now. So we're going to fix the price. So we're going to build more. Unfortunately, because it took all this infamy, our various partners in trade and in investment have decided to abandon us. And I mean, I get that. I do get that, because we just got a bunch of infamy. But it's okay, we don't need them anymore. In fact, we might even transfer Canada after this. We might even add Canada to our repertoire, to our collection, you might say. I guess for a quick explanation of how wars work in Victoria 3 is you have the front line, and then the general just does his own thing. You don't really do much. But the way it works is, when you pick war goals, they require you to occupy certain things. So see, it says here, return Mexican Texas is controlled. This is because I occupy Mexican Texas. But you can also just occupy the capital. So at any given moment, if we were to occupy Mexico's capital, this would count for having any of the war goals. So it's either go for the capital or go for occupation of all of your war goals. Different war goals have different occupation requirements. Most of them are pretty easy to understand. Usually it's like, oh, you're conquering a state. Well, the war goal is that state, right? Anyway, the war just ended. There we go. Great, so we got all of our states. Beautiful. A gentler United States of America. We just went to war. We are a peaceful nation now. Wait, that's so funny. So this happened because Levi Egan is a pacifist, yes. So our current leader of the yeoman farmers is a pacifist. And this means you can occasionally get an event where, like, where you lose some infamy. So we just finished a war, and now it's like, yes, we are now peaceful. As if, though, we're gonna have even more war incoming. Let's begin our war against the Confederates. Or I guess we can wait for chemical warfare. It'll take 20 months. That way we can just, like, we can get our revenge by gassing the Confederates. That's a good thumbnail. I used chemical warfare to to destroy the Confederates. But no, it would be, I think I gotta focus on, like, the woke. So what I'm thinking of doing, yeah, we're taking the Mississippi, I'd said, right? We're gonna conquer along the Mississippi River. Britain might join against us. That's okay if they do. We're gonna take Mississippi, Arkansas. Where's Arkansas? Am I dumb? Yes, there it is. Arkansas, Louisiana, and I think the state of Mississippi. And then we can take more, but I think we're chill. The thing is, like, I want to make the borders look kind of nice so that I can make them the rest of what remains of them a protectorate later. Because that could command a nice, right? So I'm going to call in Britain, and if he does, I mean, like, I'll just transfer Canada. How much would Canada cost to transfer? 61 infamy? We could liberate Canada.
To summarize my somewhat waffly talk here about infamy, infamy is the price you pay for doing warlike things in Victoria 3. Having high infamy makes all nations less willing to engage in diplomacy and makes your people more radical if they are from states that you've conquered. Thus, having high infamy is bad for things like trade, as people will embargo you for having high infamy. If you go over 100 infamy, then pretty much all nations on the map will embargo you, and every great power will try to take you down. Now, at this point in the game, I'm strong enough that I could probably just go over 100 infamy, and my army is way too strong to be afraid of anyone. That said, I often play quite cautiously, for fear of throwing, so for that reason, I avoided the issue for a bit. Later on, though, we will just throw it all away and go over 100 infamy. No worries.
As the American army marches through, the Confederates like to imagine that they are liberating the slaves as they go, because we did ban slavery, of course. Although I say we, Jillian banned slavery. We are just benefiting from her choices. But yeah. It's definitely an easy war, though. We kind of over-prepared. I like to over-prepare for war, though, because then you can get the war done faster, which means that you spend less time, like, potentially, you know, having economic downturn from the war costs and all that. Although the war costs are quite expensive, but we have so much money, though. It's okay. We're rich. We're actually just, like, so rich. It's completely fine. Number 2 GDP in the whole world. Okay, behind China. I'm surprised China's doing so well. How are you... That's an insane GDP for China, not gonna lie. But good for them. Glad they're doing well. Currently being invaded by Russia, it looks like. Not so good for them. Hope they're doing okay. But here goes the Confederates. They're gonna get humiliated and lose the control of the Mississippi River. Very cool, very cool. Can start incorporating all that stuff. We got another company. What company do we want? Could do something like... We could do Colt. So Colt is when you have 5 arms manufacturers in Connecticut. I think I want to do that, because Colt is like really strong. I was gonna say we can probably end off the video pretty soon, because we've kind of done the whole like saving the campaign type thing here, and we've explained a lot of basic game mechanics. But I think we need to finish off the conquest of the Confederates. Like, we got to do that, right? That's got to be the thing that we do. Also, trying to become #1 GDP is kind of crazy. It's insane to me that Qing has done this well in GDP. They tend to not do so well, but I guess they've just been able to really like giga chat it up. They also have a pretty good, like a pretty gigantic army. Good game for them. Here, about to have an actual Afro-American president, I think, or no, I think this guy's going to end up being the president. Ambrose Allen. He's ruthless political operator. That's fine. Rip, dude, we just can't seem to get... I was hoping for a female president at some point, but like I said, I showed the save file before. I made Susan Anthony the Empress of America at one point. That was on a live call with Jillian, just like between the two of us. But unfortunately, that wasn't recorded. That was just like for the love of the game. But it's difficult. Victoria 3, as I mentioned, is difficult to make whatever you want happen sometimes. It's not always really doable. We can conquer more now, so let's do that. Again, we're going to check for the high GDP states. 7 million, 3 million, 6 million. Okay, so it's going to be like these 3, I guess. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's declare for Tennessee. Let's do this. Then I also want Kentucky. And I want North Carolina. And also, I think at this point, do we just go full infamy? I mean, maybe once we get dreadnoughts, because then we can actually have like a real navy. But to be fair, like, who's gonna enable? You know, what's gonna happen if we go full infamy? Who's gonna stop us, right? Who is gonna stop us? What, are the British gonna invade? I'll just take Canada, bro. Yeah, let's just conquer all of it. Why waste everyone's time, right? Spain sides with them. I don't care. What kind of navy do you have, Spain? 19 ships. Don't care. Also, damn, look at that. Isabel de Bourbon as Ginger. I didn't know that. But yeah, what was Spain gonna do? You know, like they got nothing. Like, I don't see anyone on the map being able to threaten me. Germans 26 ships, British. So the British have a navy. However, I think I can defend against just the British. Do the French have a navy? No, the French have no navy. The Russians have something of a navy. Chinese have no navy. Japan has no navy. Yeah, there's nothing to worry about here. And here goes. There is 150 guys here, but they're just... I don't think they're gonna have enough defense to defend against this. It's kind of insane. Interesting, they have a black... Dude, wait a minute, bro, this is crazy. They got 84-year-old Frederick Douglass fighting for the Confederates. Oh, man. Oh, my goodness. That's something. Look, dude, Frederick Douglass in the fucking Confederate-ass outfit. Oh, my God. I gotta take a screen cap. I took a snipping tool of that real quick. Oh, my goodness. You'd think there'd be some kind of, you know... You'd have some kind of moral objection to this, perhaps, but... Although, unless did they ban slavery? Maybe they're just based. No, they still have slavery, so no, they would have some kind of moral objection to this, I would think. I actually lost a battle, that's cringe. Imagine. I can't believe I caught that. Frederick Douglass. Oh my goodness. Normally I barely pay attention to who's in charge of the battles, but I saw a guy with dark skin and I was like, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. There we go, look at that. No more Confederates. Reconstructed the nation. Wait a minute, now do we get the Civil War journals? Oh my goodness, I didn't know this even happened. Now we get the Civil War journals. That's so funny. Wait, that means we can get Afro-American culture, hilariously enough. Wow, yeah. So these journals normally fire when you... And we also get the Treaty of Payne's Landing. These normally fire when you, like, finish Civil War. But... I guess... Yeah, wow. Attempt on Allen's life. Okay, someone tried to kill the president, I guess. That's crazy, dude. I've never, like, lost Civil War and then reconquered them and then gotten the event like that. Let's take Canada now. So yeah, here comes the great invasion of London. And even though the British Navy could kick my teeth in, I think they're just gonna not. So Britain has managed to occupy. They have managed to occupy the Liberia, which is rather bothersome. Wow, yeah, it's you know, it's gonna be fun, I think, to do a German playthrough on this patch and make like a relatively small navy and just invade Britain. I think it could be real fun to do like a full Infamy Germany playthrough on the currently relatively broken patch. For context here, the British Navy is way bigger than mine and should be able to stop me. but the current AI is quite bad at doing anything naval related, so they're just not intercepting my navy. Thus, I can land in London. In the future, once the hotfixes get around to fixing up the current broken AI, I'm sure we'll see Britain once again rule the waves, but for now, the naval game is quite easy. Take advantage of that for whatever wacky playthroughs you might have in mind, I guess.
Here comes the end of the war with Britain. There it is. There we go, we got Canada, big blue Canada now. They get the Dominion flag with a star on it. It's so weird looking. And yeah, okay, there we go. So I think at that point, maybe we call the run. Raise their taxes. Yes, raise the taxes on Canada, yeah. The nice thing about having Canada is just that they have a ton of resources, so you can just get all this lumber into your market, which is really cool. Is Mexico still... Yeah, obviously we can maybe protectorate them, but it's okay. I think at this point we're done now. I think I'm done. We're gonna... I guess we have to take Alaska. Like, I guess we gotta do that, but... I don't know. It'll just take like a long time, and I want to be done here. I hope that, having watched this, those of you that are new to Victoria 3, maybe you've picked it up for the free weekend. Maybe you saw Jillian play and you wanted to play it. Maybe you saw me play and you wanted to play. Fuck, I mean, that happens sometimes too. Hope you learned something here. I hope that you understand that, like, currently, the game's a little bit of a mess with regards to balance and AI and stuff, but, like, the economy still works. So when people talk about, like, oh, like, Victoria 3 is terrible, like, it's all falling apart, the economy stuff is still working. So the meat of the game is still functioning quite well. I'd highly recommend that you get into the game, just because it has so much interesting stuff going on with the economy and with the investment pool, and, like, funny stuff like, you know, owning all the opium in India in order to fund, like, your wine obsession. Before we go, we can quickly check. Okay, the wine, still not very profitable. This is just the unfortunate reality of wine being one of the weaker goods in the game. But, like, we really did try. Okay, we tried. It's the third most profitable company in the whole world, okay? That's got to count for something, all right? It's got to count for something. That's their most profitable company in the world. If we check how much of it we're exporting, we can see here this trade. This is a pretty big trade center. 200. We're exporting like nearly 3,000 units. Now most of what we're exporting is guns. We've decided to become a big gun exporter. Very American. But this is at least something. I mean, you know, normally you don't see like any wine on the market, to be honest. Who's the biggest importer? It's the Spanish, it looks like, and then of course we're the biggest exporter. It makes a lot of sense. But yeah, in Venezuela it's expensive, so I guess we'd want to get control of them, but it's only, they're consuming like 1 unit of wine, so it's kind of just a weird scenario over there. Wine is just cheap across the whole fucking planet. We make too much. We make too much, and we can't get people to consume more. I guess we could get the SOL to go even higher by making more consumer goods. We could try to do something like that, but it's a lot of work to raise the SOL. It takes a lot of economy planning. And a lot of immigrants actually make it harder too, because it makes it harder to make everyone employed. But regardless, this was really fun. I enjoyed this. Jillian, if you're watching, okay, I hope you learned something. Sorry we couldn't make Susan Anthony the president like we did before, but at least it happened off camera. At least I have the save file for it. Okay, so I have the save file for it, so we can show that off a little bit. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you're interested in more Victoria 3 stuff, I got lots of Vic 3 content on the channel, so be sure to check all that out.
Big thank you to Jillian for providing me with this save file to root through and save. I really love her content and recommend you check out her channel. If you're interested in buying Victoria 3, it's still on sale for a few more days, so be sure to use my link to buy it, assuming that the price isn't higher on the Paradox store for you compared to Steam. The Paradox store will send you a Steam key, but Steam has regional prices that might sometimes be cheaper than the prices on the Paradox store. Always prioritize yourself, get whatever's cheaper for you, but if they're the same price, I would like it if you used the Paradox link in the description in the pinned comment. I get a small cut of the proceeds if you purchase using my link, so it would mean a lot to me if you do use it, but no pressure, of course. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you want more help, feel free to join my Discord and ping me with any questions you might have. We're a welcoming and friendly community. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your time.